WNYC. Marketplace is coming your way next. Tonight on the show, supply chains are finally calming down, meaning retailers can finally afford to slim down their inventories.
You're feeling, just a general sigh, like, oof, the cost of moving goods is shrinking, the freight rates are going down. I'm not waiting a month or two longer to get something out.
Why stores are keeping less stock. That's next on Marketplace at 6:30. We'll have more All Things Considered at 7, and we'll be carrying it an extra hour tonight from 8 to 9 for more Donald Trump coverage at 6:30.
WNYC is supported by New York Blood Center. Every 2 seconds, someone needs blood. Donating takes less than an hour of time, and up to 3 lives can be saved. Appointment information and more is available at nybc.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden, designed to offer employees secure access to the right logins from anywhere at any time and on any device. Learn more at bitwarden.com.
Yes, the labor market is still going strong. But some signs today tell us things might be cooling down. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Fidelity. A dedicated Fidelity advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. And by Domo, the data experience platform innovator that puts data to work for everyone so they can multiply their impact on the business. More at domo.com.
In Portland, Oregon, I'm Rima Chreis, in for Kai Rizdal. It is Tuesday, April 4th. Good to have you with us. Now, of course, the attention today is on our legal system, but we are going to stay in our lane and focus on where the economy is headed. And today we got some pretty important revealing data about our job market. It comes to us by way of the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. It shows us that employers in February posted the fewest job openings in nearly 2 years. Fell by more than 600,000. Meanwhile, the number of people hired and let go stayed about the same. Now, in normal times, fewer job openings might not seem like a great thing, but right now, cautiously speaking, it's a pretty good sign. Marketplace's Sabri Benishore explains why.
For inflation to not be crazy, wage growth has to also not be crazy. That is why the Fed would like to see a cooler labor market. Cooler, not cold. The problem is, when the Fed has fought inflation before, it's usually ended up freezing the labor market, sending the economy into a recession. The hope is that this time around, we get a labor market that is just right. Inflation comes down to just right, and the economy lives happily ever after until the next crisis.
This report really shows the soft landing that we've all been hunting for so many months.
Layla O'Kane is a senior economist at Lightcast. In the last 2 months, new job openings have fallen by 1.3 million. Layoffs, meanwhile, have not surged. That is encouraging because it shows a cooling labor market without the mass layoffs. But what about all those layoffs in tech? Just 3 weeks ago, Meta said it would lay off another 10,000 workers. Then Amazon said it would lay off another 9,000.
This is not an economy-wide thing or even from this data, a tech sector-wide thing.
There's evidence some workers are moving out of sectors that ramped up in the pandemic, like transportation and warehousing, and going into sectors that haven't yet fully recovered, like hotels and restaurants, which would be a sign of the economy coming into balance. On the other hand, when it comes to fighting inflation, we're really just a mile into the marathon.
Across most metrics, the labor market still looks really tight.
Matthew Luzetti is chief U.S. economist at Deutsche Bank.
You still have 4 million more job openings than unemployed individuals. That measure before the pandemic was closer to 1.2 million.
Many companies are still ravenous for workers. Before the pandemic, there were around 7 million job openings. Today, there are just under 10 million.
The number itself is still very big.
Lee Farage is head of macro strategy in North America for State Street.
It's still a long way to go before you can say the labor market is in balance. A long way to go.
But on the other hand, if the number of job openings keeps declining at this pace, it could return to pre-pandemic levels by the summer. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
Speaking of what things were like pre-pandemic, we are starting to see another shift in the workplace. Like Sabri mentioned, the giant tech firm Meta just announced a slate of layoffs, but it also announced that it is no longer listing new remote positions. And it's not just the parent company of Facebook and Instagram pulling back on remote work. A recent survey from the Labor Department shows nearly 3 out of 4 businesses say their employees worked remotely, rarely or not at all, in 2022. Marketplace's Kristen Schwab looks at this pushback against remote work and what it might say about our economy.
Since the pandemic began, companies have been punking their employees by changing their remote work policies. Like, okay, it's time to come back. Just kidding. Delta variant. Okay, come back now. Just kidding. Omicron. Okay, for real this time. Hello? Anyone out there?
We've seen those dates come and go over and over again for years now.
Andy Challenger is with the outplacement firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas.
Really because employees voiced that they would leave.
Challenger says the power, once in the hands of workers with lots of options, is shifting back to employers, especially in industries with more layoffs and fewer job openings. Julia Pollack, an economist at ZipRecruiter, says most companies don't like fully remote work because studies show that generally candidates who tend to apply for these jobs are less productive.
People who want to moonlight or who want to smoke pot all day or watch movies while working or whatever.
Workers in hybrid environments have the highest productivity levels because it allows for face-to-face meetings without the taxing everyday commute. And Pollack says companies that list hybrid jobs get the most applicants.
It is about twice as many, and sometimes even more.
But it'll take more than strict bosses and a questionable economy to cement a back-to-the-office lifestyle. Economist Nick Bloom at Stanford says the push coming from the corner office also has the support of the younger workers in the pit.
They want to socialize. They also want to get mentored, and they normally live in, apartments, flat shares, so they can't all work from home.
And this is something Mark Zuckerberg noted in his decision to pause remote hiring at Meta. He says data suggests engineers who started at the company in person performed better than people who trained remotely. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, it was kind of meh. They did not like that jobs report. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. We have talked a lot about inventories over the past few years. First, when the congested supply chain made it hard for retailers to get the actual supplies they needed. Then when retailers had too much inventory on hand because they over-ordered. But in the time since, many companies have managed to whittle down their inventories to much more normal levels. And today we learned that inventory levels grew last month at a slower pace than in January and February. That's according to the Logistics Managers Index. As Marketplace's Justin Ho explains, it seems as though many companies have been rethinking their inventory strategy.
A lot of retailers don't see a need to bulk up on inventory right now.
We're letting it run a little closer to the vest than we were in the past.
That's Pat Whalen, who handles imports at Sahadi's, a grocery store in Brooklyn. He says part of the reason is that the cost of carrying inventory is a lot higher than it was last year. But Whalen also says supply chains are just calmer now.
You're feeling, just a general sigh. Like, oof, the cost of moving goods is shrinking. The freight rates are going down. I'm not waiting for containers. I'm not waiting, a month or two longer to get something out.
A big reason is that overseas manufacturers are finally back up and running after shutting down earlier in the pandemic.
People are back to work throughout China and the rest of Asia.
That's Dale Rogers, a professor of supply chain management at Arizona State University, who helps put together the Logistics Managers Index.
Things are being produced. The zero COVID policies over there seem to be over. And so the products are starting to flow again.
And that means companies don't have to keep extra product on hand just in case they need it.
And so we're going back to normal ordering patterns where the inventory is coming in more just in time.
Rogers says that's not universal. For instance, inventories of computers and home supplies are still high since those products aren't selling well. Brian Yarbrough, consumer research analyst at Edward Jones, says retailers have worked hard to get rid of products that aren't as popular right now.
There was a lot of discounting. There were a lot of promotions to move product and get inventories more in line with where they need to be.
Now that inventories are in better shape, Yarbrough says many of those promotions are over, at least for now.
If the consumer spending environment slows more than retailers expect, and all of a sudden you start having concerns around inventories, that's when most retailers will probably start to pull the markdown levers to make sure they move through that inventory.
But if the economy stays strong, Yarbrough says we'll see leaner shelves and more full-priced items. I'm Justin Howe for Marketplace.
So earlier we heard from Kristen about the pushback against remote work. But what about people who don't even have the option of working in an office? You know, if you're a freelancer or a writer, it can feel like you have limited options. You can work at a loud coffee shop and debate asking the baristas to turn down the music, or you can work in your living room in sweats, or you can join a co-working space. Which brings us to today's installment of our series, My Economy.
I'm Janice Cook-Newman, and I'm the founder of Page Street in San Francisco. Page Street is a new co-working space just for writers, and we work kind of on a different model. I belonged in the past to a couple of co-working spaces for writers, and the model that they had always used was that they could only take as many members as they had offices. And the thing is, in a city as expensive as San Francisco, that's not really sustainable. So I thought the better idea would be to use what I think of as the Gold's Gym model, where we could take more members than we had desks, because typically on any day, you know, maybe 10% of your total membership comes into work. So the experience of Page Street is kind of like going to your favorite cafe to write. So you come, you find an empty table, you sit down, you start working. And there's never any barista giving you side eye because you haven't ordered enough lattes to sit there. We do have to pay rent, but we pay less than the cafe that was there before us because we are also a nonprofit. That has really helped us be able to keep our prices low. The beauty of this model allows me to price it, one, cheap enough for writers who don't typically have a lot of money. And it's really run like a subscription service. We go through Stripe. People are automatically billed. So for $160 a month, you have unlimited access 24/7 to the space because we use a smart lock. And then we have a number of writers who are with us on fellowship, and they are able to come and use the space for nothing. I think that it's, especially in San Francisco, important to have spaces that are not devoted to tech, that there are spaces devoted to the arts. You know, the writers, they have a certain feeling of ownership about the place, so they take care of it because it is such an unusual thing in a city like San Francisco, which is losing so many of these spaces for artists.
That is Janice Cook-Newman, author and owner of Page Street in San Francisco, California. Now, we can't do this series without you, so let us know what's going on in your economy over at marketplace.org/myeconomy. Coming up,
you can kind of listen to it and you can know if it's hollow or not.
All right, I am all ears. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones fell 198 points, about 0.6%, to end at 33,402. The Nasdaq shed 63 points, 0.5%, to close at 12,126. The S&P 500 was off 23 points, almost 0.6%, to land at 4,100. Now, we heard from Sabri about the jobs report. Survey this week from Bankrate indicates that 56% of American workers who responded were likely to seek a new position in the next 12 months. That was up 5% from its survey last year. GM fell 1.4% after 5,000 of its white-collar workers chose to take part in a buyout program. Meanwhile, Ford gained 0.3% after reporting an increase of about 10% in its quarterly U.S. sales today. Bond prices rose. The yield on the 10-year T-note fell to 3.33%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by McDermott, Will & Emery, an international law firm helping clients make progress toward their goals by turning big ideas into actionable plans. Learn how McDermott makes the process as satisfying as the end result at MWE.com. And by SoFi. With a SoFi high-yield savings account, members can earn more money on their money. Plus, deposits are FDIC insured. Learn more at SoFi.com. SoFi.com. Get your money right. SoFi Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
WNYC is supported by Carnegie Hall, which presents Bernard Labadie conducting the orchestra of St. Luke's and guests Joelle Harvey and Yeston Davis in an all-Handel program on April 13th. Tickets and information at carnegiehall.org.
Legendary New York City spaces like the Palladium, Paradise Garage, and the Savoy Ballroom shaped modern music and culture. Now, Lincoln Center is celebrating that legacy with a series of performances by different artists, including Oscar winner Ariana DeBose. On the next All of It, she joins us in studio to preview her show, which is packed with medleys, mashups, and candid storytelling. I'm Allison Stewart. Join me for All of It, weekdays at noon on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. A reminder, everybody, we'll have an extra hour of All Things Considered tonight from 8 to 9 to bring you additional coverage of former President Trump's arraignment today. NPR will have a special from 9 to 10. We will carry that as well. You're listening to WNYC.
This is Marketplace. I'm Rima Chreis. An argument can be made that for anything involving at least two parties, for things to be successful, there needs to be trust. And that is certainly true when it comes to banking. You know, we saw how the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, even if momentarily, caused a lapse in trust, where many people found themselves thinking, wait, is my money safe? Am I good? But what does it look like when a population has truly lost all trust in the institutions that manage the economy? Emily Stewart is a business reporter for Vox Media, and she wrote about how that is the story in Argentina, a country with a troubled economic history caught in a boom-bust cycle. Emily, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I am fascinated by what is going on in Argentina. You lived there for several years. I know you were recently there. So I'd love to just start off with some of your general observations about how people in the country navigate the day-to-day economy.
So, I mean, for people who aren't familiar, one kind of consistent issue with Argentina's economy, at least over the past decades, is they have super high inflation. So to put this into some perspective, their annual inflation rate just hit 100%.
Wow.
Ours is 6%, so it's very high. Mm-hmm. And so basically what that means is to live in the economy there, you know, you have to be pretty savvy to survive in the economy there because your money obviously is constantly losing value. And so that looks like a lot of things. Mm-hmm. You know, most people keep their money, if they can, in dollars instead of pesos to the extent that they can save. Mm-hmm. To be clear here, a lot of people are unable to save. Mm-hmm. The government makes it really difficult to get dollars. So most people wind up on the black market, which they call the blue dollar.
Right.
A little bit counterintuitive. So to put this into, you know, some numbers.
Yeah.
The official exchange rate is 200 pesos, about 200 pesos to $1. The real exchange rate, the blue dollar rate is it's nearing 400. So it's really about double.
Mm-hmm. Right. You write in the article, and you're making this point, which is that when you can't trust the bank, the currency, or anybody in charge, things can get pretty weird pretty fast. What are some of those weird things that you've observed?
I mean, it is just a situation where people really do have a lot of cash. You know, I was there recently. A friend of mine sold his mother's house for over $100,000. That deal was all in cash dollars. And he and his brother put some of the money into the bank, and now the plan is to take it out. They put the money in to make sure that the dollars were real. And there are just kind of ways, big and small, you know, that this kind of changes the way that you have to live. You know, people will pay for things in a lot of installment plans, right? You do get discounts in cash a lot of the time there. And there's sort of a tacit agreement that that's because nobody's paying taxes, right? You know, they have all different exchange rates. There are a lot of protests there a lot of the time. And some of that's because unions and workers are constantly pushing for higher wages. It really is a situation of you know, a wage price spiral, right? Prices keep going up. People need their wages to go up, and their wages just don't keep up.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then it feels like when you're operating in this way, and you make this point in the article, which is that you can't really think about the future. You're not saving. You're forever in the present.
Right. You know, that was what one historian I talked to said to me was that, you know, you can't save. You can't really think about the future. And, you know, when I was living there were moments when the government would say, it's time to put your money in pesos. It's time to put your money in pesos. And, you know, I think a lot about like, what if you did at that point and now your money's worth so much less? Like, to put this into some context, when I moved to Argentina in 2008, the exchange rate was 3 to 1. And that's 15 years, but that's only 15 years, right? Like, that's a huge amount of devaluation. And so, you know, I think sometimes in the U.S. and you know, other countries, we don't think about what it really is like to really not be able to trust that if you put your money in the bank that it's going to be there.
Well, yeah, that leads into my next question. So obviously we are not saying that what is going on in Argentina can be compared to what's going on here, but what are the larger learnings? How can we use this case to think about our own economy?
I mean, obviously, like you said, we can't make a one-to-one comparison, but I think it really is important to remember that the confidence and trust really underpin our financial system. You know, we can debate about whether it was a good idea for the federal government to bail out some of these banks that were in trouble, whether or not it was a bailout, if it's a good idea for the Fed to loan money to banks, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I think you have to play out the counterpoint of what happens if people really can't trust that their deposits are there. Like, do we want to live in a world where people are hiding tens of thousands of dollars in their homes and in their mattresses? I think the answer there is no, right? We want to be able to trust our institutions and trust our banks, and it's important to think about.
Emily Stewart is a business reporter for Vox.com, which is where you can check out her article, What It Looks Like When a Country Doesn't Trust Its Banks. Emily, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And now a story about a local economy. Over in southwest Wyoming, the energy landscape is changing. Oil and gas production is slowing down, and coal plants are closing. In fact, at the site of one coal plant nearing its end, a nuclear facility is scheduled to open. It's being built by TerraPower, a company co-founded by Bill Gates. It'll likely generate thousands of new jobs. And to help prepare for this shift, one community college, well, it's shifting what it offers. Wyoming Public Radio's Caitlin Tan has that story.
It's a windy, sub-zero day at Western Wyoming Community College in Rock Springs, a small city that's long been tied to energy. And in the sprawling sagebrush behind the campus, 7 young students are climbing 4-story tall wooden poles. It's part of a new power line program at the school, the first one in the state. Their teacher, Lance Caldwell, gives them tips.
Don't forget on your way down, lock the knee before it goes into the pole, not after.
In Wyoming, there's a growing demand for power workers. The state's main utility company, Pacificor, had 48 job openings in late March, some with $15,000 sign-on bonuses. And if the nuclear facility proves successful, Pacificor will take it over in the early 2030s. That plant will need more workers, and Caldwell says there isn't the workforce to meet that demand.
They have a whole generation about my age that's about to retire all at the same time, and the market is going to be very, very short of trained, qualified people.
Students who finish this program can land an apprenticeship, and after that, they can expect to make about $200,000 a year. Trayton Davenport is a student. He'll finish up the program this spring. For now, he's learning how to stay safe.
So we hit the pole to make sure it's not rotted out and make sure it's not going to fall on us. So you just tap it. You can kind of listen to it and you can know if it's hollow or not.
If it's hollow, you don't climb it. This is dangerous work, but it's necessary to keep power flowing. The nuclear facility requires up to 2,000 workers to build and run it. Everything from mechanics, welders, plant operators, to power workers.
We have the opportunity at the ground level, obviously, to kind of help shape what that workforce looks like.
Amy Murphy is helping the college grow its energy programs.
What industry wants is our students to get the training here and stay in Wyoming.
Murphy says they're focusing on the jobs that are available. For a long time, that meant coal, oil, and gas. The college actually discontinued the oil and gas program in 2020. Notably, the nearby natural gas fields have largely been on a downward decline in production since the boom in 2009. So now, much of the focus is on nuclear power. In fact, if the new plant is successful, 5 more could come to the region. Jake Manico is a welding instructor. He says the discipline can be tailored for many different types of energy.
We were oil and gas for a long time, and it's still out there, but everyone knows that green energy is kind of coming on hard. We might need to change our mindset a little bit and retool our tool bag, so to speak, to teach those industries, but we can do it.
As the construction on the nuclear plant kicks off this spring, Manico and his students will help with testing welds that'll be needed to build the facility. Back outside, student Hagen Jones is on the ground, looking up at a pole he just climbed.
When you're moving, it's not bad. It's when you stop and you can feel your pole rocking a little bit. It's nerve-wracking.
He says the first time he climbed a power pole was pretty scary in Wyoming's 40-mile-per-hour winds. But he loves it now. Jones graduates this spring. He's hoping the growing nuclear industry will allow him to stay and work in the state. In Rock Springs, Wyoming, I'm Caitlin Tan for Marketplace.
This final note on the way out today comes to us from the desk of, well, that's just sad. Apparently, according to Bloomberg, people are not using all of their vacation days. If that is you, you are among about half of U.S. workers, according to Pew researchers, who are skipping out on paid time off. And according to the survey, the number one reason is fear. Fear that you might fall behind on work or unfairly burden your coworkers or even lose your job, especially, with hiring slowing down and headlines of high-profile layoffs. But I am here to tell you, and I guess myself honestly, that vacations are wonderful and necessary, and we should take advantage of that PTO.
Marketplace is supported by ChargePoint, charging for electric cars, trucks, buses, and beyond. Learn more at ChargePoint.com. ChargePoint, driving a better way.
All right, we've got to go, but first, here's your moment of economic context. Sticking with this vacation thread, there's news out today that Expedia is rolling out a new ChatGPT feature in its app. Now, the company has used AI technology before in its platform, but with this news, travel becomes one of the first industries to really embrace this newer tech. According to an article from the Wall Street Journal, these natural language search models will only get a traveler so far. But hey, at least you'll be taking your vacation, right? Our digital and on-demand team includes Carrie Barber, Dylan Miettinen, Janet Wynn, Olga Oxman, Ellen Rolfs, Virginia K. Smith, and Tony Wagner. Francesca Levy is the executive director, and I'm Rima Jerez. We'll be back tomorrow. This is APM.